Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to start assembling our David Smith 6-cube sculpture. We've talked about David Smith before in class and learned that he's an abstract expressionist sculptor. Here is a portrait of him, and here's one of his artworks. You can see how all of the forms, the separate forms of his artwork, are welded together to create one complete form. Today in our Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to start assembling our David Smith 6-cube sculpture. We talked about David Smith in the past and learned that he was an abstract expressionist sculptor. Here's a portrait of him, and here's part of his, or one of his sculptures that he created. And you can see how the separate forms are welded together to create the final form of the sculpture. Today in class, I want you to be thinking of negative spaces. Negative spaces are the pieces in between the regular solid forms of your sculpture. So you can see negative spaces right here and in between here, where you can kind of see the sky through the pieces of the sculpture. So the forms are three-dimensional shapes. So the boxes, the cubes, the rectangular prisms we made are the forms. And at the end, we could also refer to the overall form of the sculpture, where the whole thing is a form. Another part I want you to be thinking about today is unity. Unity is when the parts of an artwork combine to form a complete whole. So these all little cubes and rectangles aren't very much on their own, but when they're put together, they form a unity and they form a complete whole to the sculpture. Here's another picture of David Smith standing at his studio, and you can see, I wanted to put this slide in here so you could have a sense of scale and perspective. So he's standing here, and this is probably, I don't know, 14 feet tall or something. It's a pretty large sculpture. Now today, our sculptures are going to be looking something like this. You're going to have a lot of creative choices you can make in your sculptures and how you make them. But I do want you to be thinking of how your sculpture is going to look different from all sides and how you're incorporating the idea of negative space as well as the positive forms and how those are going to work together. So today, as we get to the creating part, there's a couple things you're going to need to be thinking about. You're going to have your A and your B colors together. You've got two A colors, two B colors, your rectangular prism, your scissors, a paper towel, an orange top glue bottle, and a popsicle stick. And as you put all of the stuff together, you're going to have to think about how you're going to start. I would suggest starting by taking one of your cubes and gluing a flat edge of it down to the sculpture base. This is going to give you a solid base to start with. Okay, you are going to have to spend some time holding the pieces together so that they glue appropriately and that they're really nice and solid. Now, one of the tricks is making the cubes like tilted or swiveled so that they have an interesting shape. I start by putting a little dot there with my pencil, and then I take my scissors and I kind of wiggle it in to cut a little hole in that dot, and then I use my scissors to create an X-like form. Okay, and that X-like form that I just drew here kind of looks like the top of, let's say, a to-go soda container. And that's going to give your cube, the point of your cube, somewhere to rest while it's sitting. I take my bone folder and fold those so that I can kind of get them bent down in a sense. Then I cut this side of the cube by cutting the edges and cutting the flat part there, and I fold it in the same way with that little X shape so that it's going to fit onto this other cube there. So then I put some glue in the hole and on the point, and I kind of rub it around just like we learned in a previous demonstration and put it on the side there where I intend to glue the two together. And then I hold those together. Underneath the form, I'm holding the little flaps of paper onto that cube so that the flaps of paper are really sticking to the bottom corner of that cube. And now I've got one cube flat and one cube swiveled. Now this one I glue on flat as well because it's going to give it some more strength. The trick with this is using just regular glue. It's hard to get enough strength in the overall form. If we were using something like hot glue, it would be much easier because hot glue is much stronger. So if we have that, we might be using it, but if we have just regular Elmer's glue or white glue, we'll just use that and we'll just have to hold it a little bit longer. Now, the next one here, I do by snipping the point of one of my cubes off and then cutting along the seams of the cube. Then you can fold those seams in to create this same idea. Of course, this one's only going to have 3 because there's only 3 edges there, but it's going to be the same idea. It's going to give you a little flat edge that you can work with, and then you can have that right onto the point of your thing. Okay, now as you get started for this part here, you've got that one on, and now we need to start working on the next cube. At this point, you're thinking, you know, how do I want this to be, this overall form to work? Mine, I'm going to have kind of curve up over the top and then down the other side. Okay, I'm going to put that cube kind of right in the middle. Okay, so I have to, again, cut it, form it, get that last piece in there. Again, every time you do this, I like to mark with just a pencil where I'm going to cut ahead of time, so I kind of have a good idea of how I'm going to be putting it together and where I'm going to be cutting. So there I can kind of take the guesswork out of it by putting those little beginning pencil lines on there. Okay, and as I do this piece of it, you know, again, I'm working how I'm going to put it together, where the little slots are going to be, and where that glue is going to need to go. Folding it in with my bone folder, because I find that it's much easier to fold with the bone folder than my fingers. Okay, here again, I'm just holding it, and look at that negative space I've created there. It's pretty interesting because it's got a lot of different lines going into it. And then here I'm going to take my green form and put that like right on the top. Now on this one I cheat in a little bit and I use the X-Acto knife. So if you need to use the X-Acto knife, or you get to a point where you do need that, then let me know if you need to use that, and then you'll be able to finish having it together. Now as you're finished, look at these negative spaces I have in here, and look at the positive space or the positive forms that I have around the outside and how they kind of lead the eye over. Okay, again, you're thinking about the unity, how your whole form works together, and reminding yourself that the forms together create an overall form. So do please think about the negative space and how the whole sculpture works together as a complete form. And thank you for joining me for the 6-cube sculpture.